all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. The Lord is my inheritance. I love just digging deeper in that psalm, but what I love even more is that there is one name that is mentioned, and that is the Lord is my shepherd. But there are so many characteristics that go into that one name. There are so many underlying names of God that go into one name, and that is the Lord that is my shepherd. And it just got me thinking, honestly, we all have shepherds in our lives, whether it be our boss, whether it be our pastor, whether it be our mother, our father, our wife, our husband, even some friends that we've given that position to just shepherd us in our lives. And not all of them in my life, and I'm sure in some of your guys' lives, have been necessarily a true representation of what the good shepherd looks like. And sometimes when we read about the name of the Lord is my shepherd, we can sometimes put our lenses on that of like, well, I was hurt in this area, or this happened in this area. And we have, in a sense, our faith in some imperfect people that can create perfect storms in our life. And I think it's just so good to look back on these verses right now and go, well, what actually is a shepherd? Because a shepherd is someone who provides what we need. He's the peace within us so we don't have to fear the chaos in the world around us. He is our healer. The good shepherd tends to his sheep. He bandages up the broken legs of his sheep. He shows us the right path to be on when all other sheep are running towards the cliff. He is our righteousness. He's present in the meadow and the valley, in the wholeness and in our brokenness. He is our help when we've ran the wrong way and got our horns stuck in the fence. He helps us get free. He is our standard of victory, and he sanctifies us and is our portion and gives us an inheritance even when we don't deserve it. All of this is wrapped up in a shepherd who is our friend and our companion. And I just love that. I love just reminding myself that, oh no, this is the standard of who God is. This is what he's saying when he says, I am your shepherd, you shall not want, because in me is all that you need. I love it. I want to stop and pause on a couple of different verses here in Psalm 23. And if you have your Bibles with you, just open them up there. But verse 4, this just caught my attention, and I've realized that when I'm preparing for a message, if something really catches my attention, I really feel like God is doing something in the midst of that. So my prayer today is that there's someone that just needs to hear this today. So verse 4, even when I walk through the valley, or the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me, your rod and your staff protect me and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup runneth over with blessing. When we seek him out in the valley, he prepares us for our victory in the meadow. I want to dig into that a little bit more. Even when I walk through. The word when jumped out at me there. It wasn't if, it's when. Oftentimes we walk through great times, and sometimes we walk through lower times. But in the midst of that, the next word that jumped out to me was, I walk through the darkest valley. It's not to the darkest valley. And what I want to say here is that the shepherd is so present in those valleys when they show up, but the valley is not our destination. It's a stepping stone. The Lord brings us through that valley, not to the valley. And just this sense of he's always moving us, and sometimes it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, but there's a saying around here that is, every crisis has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I want to suggest that in the valley, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end also. I've been through a lot of valleys in my life, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more. Me and Ali have gone through a lot of valleys in our life, hand in hand, just walking through life together. And we hit these things that just feel like they're bombarding us, and we're getting attacked from all sides. And there's actually been a couple of times where Erica said, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when you're going into the beginning of it and the middle of it, it feels like, where is the end of this thing? But we're moving through the valley, not to the valley. So there is always a beginning, a middle, and an end. And God is always with us in the midst of that. He is always present with us in the midst of that. And we can always turn to him. And that kind of leads us to the next verse, which is 5. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. And what I really felt was being in the presence of your enemies isn't necessarily in the meadow, it's in the valley. So in the valley, there is also a feast to be had with God. And what are we feasting on in the midst of our valley? Are we turning to the shepherd or are we turning to the lions, in a sense? And as we turn to the shepherd, we get all that we need, even in the midst of a valley. I was talking to my father this week, and he grew up a sheep farmer, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later on too. But one of the things that he said is, in these days, sheep don't naturally follow a shepherd unless they have food. But in the days that we're talking about here, in biblical days, there was not a ton of grass. So to get to the greener meadow, you had to walk through valleys. And the sheep would follow their shepherd and stay close to their shepherd because they knew their shepherd provided safety and provided a provision. In the midst of that valley, he would still provide for his sheep. And it's just, even in the midst of this coronavirus, the valley in your life might feel like, I've lost my job, I'm getting surrounded by bills, I'm feeling isolated, I am having to learn how to be a teacher at home, and I don't know how to do this. Whatever you might be feeling at the minute, the Lord is with you and will bring you through it. The Good Shepherd is present in your life, in your valley and in your victory, in your bondage and in your freedom, and in your wholeness and in your brokenness. He remains the same, even when life doesn't and when we don't. I mentioned earlier that when we seek him out in the valley, he prepares us for our victory in the meadows. And I want to expand on that a little bit, and I want to talk about the life of David. So I know we're really just jumping into the word today, and I just really felt like that was so necessary today. And in the life of David, he was a shepherd, so he spent so much time in these valleys with his sheep. And we don't necessarily see a lot of that, but what we do see is, I was reading this story of when David came up against Goliath. I'm going to open my Bible here to it. And it's in 1 Samuel 17. You don't necessarily have to open to it because I'm just going to jump around. But Goliath was this monster of a man. It said he was 9 feet tall, so nearly the same height as me. And I can't even keep a straight face at that. But his spearhead alone was 15 pounds. I went to the gym the other week for the first time in months, and I could barely lift 15 pounds. I mean, it was tough going. But that was just his spearhead. This was a monster of a man. And he was chastising the Israelites. He was saying, it said, Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. Why are you all coming out to fight, he called. I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. And every day he would come out and he would shout at the Israelites, and he would say, basically, you can't come against me, you're worthless. And I feel like the enemy's strategy hasn't necessarily changed. He's always trying to shout at us, say, who are you to come against me? Or, you're not enough. And then here comes this little shepherd boy who says, don't worry about the Philistine. David told Saul, I'll go fight him. This is in verse 32. Don't be so ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted, saying, I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. He said, when a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I've done this both to lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God." What I love about this is David entered a sword fight with a sling and a stone. He entered something that should have been bigger. He should have gone in with his armor on and everything. And when they tried to put armor on him, he said, "No, this doesn't suit me. I learned how to win this fight in the valley with the sheep. I learned how to take on lions and bears in the valley to protect the lambs. And when they would get a lamb, I would go after them and I would take care of them because this is what I learned how to do." And I really feel like there's something to be learned in the valley that can't be learned in the meadows. There is something to feast on with the shepherd in the valley that cannot be learned in the meadows, but there is a victory in the meadows that can't be won without pursuing him in the valley. There's just something so beautiful about that. And again, he went into a sword fight with a stone and a sling and a stone, and he won because he had the Lord on his side. Again, I was talking about my father grew up a sheep farmer, so that's kind of my personal background. When I was younger, I grew up going to our farm for 3 months, 2 to 3 months every year, and I would stay on the farm and look after my granddad's sheep with them. It was just a really cool experience. It's some of my fondest memories from childhood. If I can get in a tractor right now, I am as happy as can be. If I can just stand in the middle of a field with cows and sheep running all over the place, I am delighted. If I get stressed, I drive out east and just kind of go into the middle of nothing. But I am so fond of those times. But a couple of things that I learned in those times by watching my granddad was that he knew every single sheep that he owned. Part of that was he would have his initials written on them, written on their horns. All of our sheep had horns at that time, and he would have his initials written on his sheep. So if one of his sheep disappeared, everyone would know that it was his, and he knew that one of them was missing. He even knew down to the fact that if a ram was in the field, when a ewe would be inseminated, because he would have some markings on the ram's chest. So if a ewe was inseminated by a sheep or by a ram, he would know, so he would move them to a different field. He had ways of telling everything about them. I remember that there was this process that we would go through. I believe it's called, we would put them in the dip. And what that would basically be a bath to protect them against pesticides and disease. And in the times that we're talking about in Psalm 23, that looks like you honor me by anointing my head with oil. You protect me. You remove any disease that tries to attack me. You take that away. I remember distinctly, sheep would never follow me. I mean, I'd be running through the field thinking I was great, and they'd all run the opposite way. And I'm like, "Come on, run after me, play with me. Let's run around." But they wouldn't want anything to do with me until the tractor would pull into the field with a bunch of different food in the back, and I'd hop on the back of the tractor, and then all the sheep would be running after us, and I'd be kicking food off, and they'd be as happy as could be, and I'd be as happy as could be too. But there's this sense of hunger that they would run into something in hunger. And in the midst of all of this, I just learned something as I watched how my granddad looked after his flock, that he knew them all, that they were marked, that they were covered against anything trying to attack them, and that he was always present to know everything that was going on. I mean, if a sheep got stuck in a fence, he would be there. Shortly after my granddad passed away, a friend of ours also had a sheep farm, and I got invited over to that to help with the lambing process. So another thing that I found as I was in the midst of this was we would sleep in the barn. We'd spend the whole night in the barn, and we'd wake up every couple of hours to look after the sheep. But my friend knew every single characteristic of the sheep in that barn. He would know what ones had difficulty lambing last year. He would know what ones were a bit more feisty. He would know all this stuff, and he'd tell us so that we could monitor them. The ones that had problems last year were, sure enough, that he said had problems last year, sure enough had problems again this year. And we would lose some of the lambs, but he would come in and he would clean out their mouth, he would clean them off, he'd kind of shake them upside down a little bit, and then he would breathe into their mouths, and they would come back to life. See, he knew what needed to happen, but if it was just me left there, I mean, he probably would have had 50% less lambs then because he was there. But what I'm getting at is we serve a God who knows us by name. We serve a God that marks us with his goodness and with his presence. And when we go through times where it doesn't necessarily feel like that, he is close. He is with us. We serve a God who knows every single hair on our head, knows everything about us. And he knows, okay, this person has gone through this. Watch them closely. I will be with you. I will be present. And I will see you to your victory. We serve a God who just knows everything about us. And even as we look at it as an earthly thing, like as I look at my childhood and as I look at these verses and I put the two and two together, I'm like, oh, wow, that makes it so much more real for me. And I don't know if it does for you. But in the midst of whatever your life looks like at the minute, and everybody's life, even though we're going through the same thing, everybody's life is looking very different at the minute. But the one thing that remains the same is that we have a shepherd who is surrounding each of us in whatever we're going through and knows every single thing about us, and that we are marked by his goodness so that the enemy knows that we are his, we are the Lord's. I just think that's so cool. And that kind of leads me to a verse that I was reading through. For this is Ezekiel 34:11 through 15. For this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search out and find my sheep. I will be like a shepherd looking for his scattered flock, and I will find my sheep and rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on that dark and cloudy day. I will bring them home to their own land of Israel from among the peoples and nations. I will feed them on the mountain of Israel and by the rivers and in all the places where people live. Yes, I will give them good pasture land on the highlands of Israel. There they will lie down in pleasant places and feed in the lush pastures of the hills. I myself will tend my sheep and give them a place to lie down in peace, says the sovereign Lord. And I will search for my lost ones who strayed away. I will bring them safely home again, and I will bandage the injured and strengthen the weak. No matter where we're at right now, we could be feeling incredibly strong right now, but God is the God of the mountains and the valleys. He is with us in the blessing and when we feel like we're in lack. And what I love about these verses is that when we were scattered on that dark and cloudy day, he came and he found us no matter where we were. And he says, I will search for the lost ones who strayed away, and I'll bring them safely home again. I will bandage them and the injured and strengthen the weak. I just really feel something on this today where whether we just have lost our peace or whatever that might look like, whether we're just needing healing in our life, I feel like the shepherd is encapsulating all things and saying that he is there for us. And just at home today, I really just wanted to release that the Lord is wanting to move in your home. So I feel like there's this kind of reaction that might happen today in people's homes where it's like, I actually feel like I've been in a valley alone, or I feel like I've been isolated, or I feel like I have just not had enough to deal with this season. And there's something in the Lord to feast on today. There's a promise that will get you through the darkest valley and not to the darkest valley. There's a promise that will bring us to the mountains of Israel and by the rivers, in a sense. We see two different verses here where one is just moving us to the other, where he just brings us to these meadows. Sometimes it feels like we're laboring through life at times, and it can feel like a bit of a struggle, but here's the thing. The good shepherd who shepherds you knows you and is drawing extra close to you. You might even be watching today, and you might not have a great relationship with the Lord, but he is saying no matter where you ran, no matter what fence you got stuck in, no matter if your leg is broken or your heart is broken, he will come and he will find you and show you his goodness and his presence. He will prepare a feast for you. I mean, I want to say is we have we're very real around here. Even if you're in the midst of a crack house right now, in the midst of a valley, he will show up in that place. He has showed up for me in worse places than that. And I really do feel like there's someone watching today that just needs to hear this message. That there is a God who encapsulates all of the good things in life. And you may have had a shepherd in your life that showed you what it looks like not to be a shepherd, but you thought it did. And I'm just here today to speak some truth as to what a shepherd looks like, who comes and marks us with his goodness, provides for us, who heals us. So I just want to pray, and as we close up today, I was kind of wrestling back and forth, but I really do feel that we're supposed to end in a song. So if the worship team wouldn't mind coming back up here, that'd be great. And just a song of hope in your life today. And Jesus, right now, we just thank you that you are doing something, that you are moving straight through Facebook Live or whatever stream you are watching on today into our homes, and you are touching our hearts. That if we're sitting in a room at home today by ourselves, that your presence will fill that room, and that you will know that the Lord and his presence, oh, there we go, is with you. That if you feel like you've just been battered and bruised, or that you're too lost for the presence of God to come and find you, that hope will be released in your life right now, and that truth will be released in your life right now. If you have felt like church and the shepherds that were over your life had hurt you to beyond the point of return to God, I hope today that you find truth in the fact that we serve a good shepherd who has what's best for us in his life. So Jesus, we just thank you, and I pray blessing over this week. I pray hope into this week. I pray feasts of your goodness in this week, whether we are in the meadow or in the valley. And I pray for patience over this week as we journey through another week of pushing into whether it be homeschooling, whatever it is, just patience and your goodness. And Lord, we just pray as we kind of are in a transitionary period of, are things opening back up? Are we staying close? What's happening? But as it looks like things are opening back up, Lord, I just pray for grace on the transition. I pray for your provision over lives. We thank you. We love you.
Thanks for tuning in to a message from the Sanctuary Church. For more information and media, go to our website at thesanctuarywestside.org or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube.